Listen carefully, because most people will never hear this, and that's exactly why they keep getting ignored. There are 6 simple words that can completely change how people feel about you. Not later. Not after a long conversation. Immediately. But here's the problem. You've been trained to say the exact opposite. Think about it. Everywhere you go, every conversation you start, it's the same line. Hey, how are you? It feels polite. It feels safe. It feels normal. But normal is exactly why it fails. Because when you sound like everyone else, you get treated like everyone else. Invisible. Replaceable. Forgettable. An attraction does not grow in familiarity that fast. It grows in curiosity. In tension. In emotional stimulation. Now pause for a second. I want you to really think about this. When was the last time someone said something to you that made you stop and think? Wait, what? That moment, that slight confusion mixed with curiosity. That's where attention lives. And attention is the first step to attraction. But most people kill that moment before it even begins. Because they choose comfort over impact. They choose safety over presence. They choose routine over awareness. And that's why they never stand out. Now let me show you what's really happening beneath the surface. When you say, "Hey, how are you?" you're not just starting a conversation. You're asking for permission. You're placing the other person in a position of control. You're saying, without realizing it, "Please engage with me." And people feel that. Even if they don't consciously think about it. They feel the imbalance. An attraction cannot grow from imbalance. Attraction grows when both people feel something. Not when one person is seeking something. Now imagine a different approach. Imagine walking up to someone. Calm. Relaxed. No rush in your body. No pressure in your voice. You look at them for a second. Not in a creepy way. But in a grounded, present way. And then you say, "I feel like you're interesting." Now notice what just happened. You didn't ask. You observed. You didn't chase. You expressed. And that small shift changes everything. Because now, they're the one wondering. They're the one thinking. They're the one leaning in, even if just slightly. And that slight lean is the beginning of attraction. But here's the truth most people don't want to accept. It's not about memorizing lines. You can repeat those 6 words 100 times. And still get ignored. If your energy is off. Because people don't respond to words. They respond to certainty. To calmness. To emotional control. This is where Stoicism comes in. Stoicism is not about being cold. It's not about suppressing emotions. It's about mastering them. It's about walking into any situation. And not being controlled by fear. Or anxiety. Or the need to be liked. Because the moment you need someone to like you, you've already lost your power. And people can feel that instantly. Let me tell you something real. There was a time someone tried everything to be liked. He watched videos. Read books. Practiced lines in front of a mirror. Tried to become perfect. But every time he stepped into a real interaction, everything collapsed. His voice would tighten. His mind would go blank. And he would fall back to the same safe words. "Hey, how are you?" And every time, the response felt flat. Polite, but empty. There was no spark. No tension. No connection. Until one day, he stopped focusing on what to say. And started focusing on how he felt. He noticed his breathing. He slowed down his movements. He allowed silence, instead of rushing to fill it. And something interesting happened. He started feeling in control. Not of the other person, but of himself. And that's when everything shifted. Because now, he wasn't entering conversations hoping to be accepted. He was entering conversations, already complete. Already grounded. Already enough. So when he spoke, his words were no longer carrying fear. They were carrying presence. And presence is rare. That's why it stands out. That's why it attracts. Now let's go deeper. Most people think attraction is about saying impressive things. It's not. It's about creating a feeling. And feelings don't come from complexity. They come from authenticity. From timing. From delivery. From silence, just as much as words. Think about the most confident person you've ever seen. They don't rush. They don't over-explain. They don't try to prove themselves. They exist, fully, in the moment. And when they speak, it feels intentional. That's what you're building here. Not a script. But a state. Because once your state is right, your words become effortless. Now I want you to picture this clearly. You're in a social setting. There's noise around you. People talking. Laughing. Trying to impress each other. And then there's you. Calm. Observing. Not trying to be the loudest. Not trying to be the funniest. Just present. That alone, already separates you. Because most people are performing. Very few are actually present. And presence is magnetic. So when you finally speak, it doesn't feel like noise. It feels like signal. It cuts through everything. Now let's bring it back to the 6 words. I feel like you're interesting. Simple. But powerful. Because it does 3 things instantly. It creates curiosity. It shows confidence. And it shifts the dynamic. You're no longer asking to be entertained. You're evaluating. And when you evaluate calmly, without arrogance, without pressure, you naturally become more attractive. But remember this. Delivery is everything. Say it too fast, it loses impact. Say it nervously, it loses meaning. Say it with expectation, it creates pressure. But say it calmly. With a slight pause. With relaxed eye contact. And no need for a specific response. That's when it lands. That's when it works. Because now, it's not just words. It's energy. Now here's something important. Not everyone will respond the way you expect. And that's okay. Because the goal is not to control outcomes. The goal is to remain unshaken. That's the real power. Being the same person. Regardless of the reaction. That's what makes you rare. That's what makes you respected. And that's what makes you attractive. Because most people change themselves depending on who they're talking to. But when you stay consistent, calm, grounded, you become someone people remember. Now take a breath. And really absorb this. You don't need to chase attention. You don't need to force conversations. You don't need to impress anyone. All you need is control over yourself. Your emotions. Your reactions. Your presence. Because once you have that, everything else becomes easier. Now before we go deeper into this, if you're starting to see things differently, follow me. Because what comes next is where most people fail without even realizing it. We're going to break down the silent mistakes that destroy attraction, and how to build a presence so strong You don't even have to try. Stay with me. Now here's where things get even more real. Because most people don't lose attraction at the beginning. They lose it in the middle. Not with what they say first, but with what they do next. You've probably seen this happen. Maybe you've even done it yourself. You start strong. You get a response. There's a moment, a small spark. And then suddenly, you start trying. Trying to keep the conversation alive. Trying to be interesting. Trying to not mess it up. And that's exactly where everything begins to fall apart. Because the moment you start trying too hard, you leave the present moment. And you enter your head. And when you're in your head, you're no longer connected to the person in front of you. You're reacting to your own thoughts. Your own fears. Your own insecurities. And people can feel that shift immediately. Even if they can't explain it. They feel the tension. The pressure. The need. An attraction cannot survive in neediness. It disappears quietly. Without warning. Now listen closely. Because this is the part that separates ordinary people from those who are truly unshaken. The goal is not to impress. The goal is not to entertain. The goal is to remain centered. No matter what happens. Whether they respond with excitement, or indifference, or even rejection. You stay the same. Calm. Grounded. Unmoved. That's power. And most people never reach it. Because they are addicted to reactions. They want validation. They want approval. They want to feel chosen. But the moment you depend on someone else's reaction, you give away your control. And without control, there is no confidence. Only performance. Let me tell you another story. There were two men in the same room. Both saw the same woman. Both felt the same initial attraction. But their approach was completely different. The first man walked up quickly. Smiling too much. Talking too fast. Trying to be funny. Trying to be liked. At first, it worked. She smiled. She responded. But within minutes, the energy shifted. Because his attention was no longer on the moment. It was on the outcome. And she felt it. The second man took his time. He didn't rush. He observed. He waited until the moment felt natural. Then he walked up calmly. Looked at her for a second. And said, "I feel like you're interesting." And then he paused. No rush to fill the silence. No need to explain himself. Just presence. Now here's what's important. It wasn't just what he said. It was what he didn't do. He didn't chase her reaction. He didn't try to impress. He didn't overtalk. He allowed the moment to breathe. And in that space, something powerful happened. She leaned in. Not physically at first, but emotionally. Because now she was curious. Now she was engaged. Now she was part of the interaction. Not just receiving it. And that's the difference. One person was performing. The other was present. One was seeking approval. The other was expressing observation. An attraction always moves toward the one who is grounded. Now here's where you need to pay attention. Because this is the silent mistake that ruins everything for most people. After you say something impactful, you feel the urge to add more. To explain. To justify. To fill the silence. Don't. Silence is not awkward. Insecurity makes it feel awkward. But silence. When you're calm. When you're relaxed. When you're unshaken. Becomes powerful. Because it creates space. And in that space, the other person starts thinking, feeling, engaging. But if you fill every moment with words, you remove that opportunity. You turn the interaction into noise. And noise is easy to ignore. Now think about this deeply. Why do people respect those who speak less, but say more? Because restraint signals control. And control signals strength. This is Stoicism in action. Not reacting impulsively. Not chasing outcomes. Not being controlled by emotions. But choosing your words. Choosing your timing. And being comfortable with whatever follows. Now let's go even deeper. Attraction is not about being liked. It's about being felt. And people don't feel you when you're trying to be perfect. They feel you when you are real, grounded, unfiltered in a calm way. Not chaotic. Not overly expressive. But centered. Balanced. And that balance is rare. That's why it stands out. Now I want you to imagine something. You're speaking to someone. And they don't respond the way you expected. Maybe they seem distracted. Maybe they give a short answer. Maybe they don't show much interest. Most people panic in that moment. They try harder. They talk more. They chase attention. But this is your moment. This is where you become different. Instead of reacting, you observe. You stay calm. You don't force anything. Because you understand something most people don't. Not every moment is meant to be one. And that's okay. Because your value is not determined by a single interaction. It's determined by your consistency. Your presence. Your control. So instead of chasing, you remain. And that alone changes how people perceive you. Because now, you are not predictable. You are not needy. You are not trying to extract something. You are simply there. Fully. And that kind of presence is rare. Now let's bring everything together. Those 6 words. I feel like you're interesting. They are not magic. They are a doorway. A doorway into a different way of being. A different way of communicating. A different way of showing up in the world. Because when you say those words, from a place of calm confidence, you are doing more than speaking. You are setting a tone. A tone of control. Of curiosity. Of quiet strength. And people feel that. Even if they don't understand it. Now here's the final truth. You don't need many words to attract people. You don't need complicated techniques. You don't need to memorize scripts. What you need is mastery over yourself. Because once you master your state, your words naturally become powerful. Your silence becomes meaningful. Your presence becomes unforgettable. And attraction becomes effortless. Now take a moment. And really let this sink in. Next time you step into a conversation, don't rush. Don't perform. Don't chase. Just be present. Observe. Feel the moment. And when you speak, let it come from that place. Calm. Certain. Unshaken. Because that's the difference between being noticed and being remembered. And if you've made it this far, you already understand something most people never will. So follow me. Because this is just the beginning. There's a deeper level to this. And once you reach it, you won't just attract people. You'll control the energy of every room you walk into. Now here's the part most people will hear, but very few will actually apply. You don't need more words. You don't need more tricks. You don't need to become someone else. What you need is discipline over your presence. Because at the end of the day, people won't remember everything you said. But they will always remember how you made them feel. And the truth is, calm confidence, unshaken energy, silent control. That leaves a mark. Not loud. Not desperate. But deep. So the next time you find yourself about to say the usual, "Hey, how are you?" Pause. Just for a second. Breathe. Feel your body. Slow everything down. And then choose differently. Not to impress. But to express. Not to chase. But to observe. Not to seek attention. But to give it, selectively. Because that's where your power is. And once you understand that, you stop trying to be attractive. And you become someone people are naturally drawn to. Without effort. Without force. Without losing yourself. That's what it means to be unshaken. Now if this shifted your perspective even a little, don't just leave it here. Take action. Apply it. And watch how people start responding to you differently. And before you go, make sure you subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear this. Because most people are still stuck saying the same things. Getting the same results. Living the same patterns. But you're different now. Stay calm. Stay present. Stay unshaken.